Welcome into the bonus question here on Hockey Inside Out, and we have a question from some of our viewers, Charles Fournier and May. Hopefully I said that properly. They both want to know, guys, will we see Carey Price and or Andrei Markov have their uniform number retired by the organization in the coming years?
I think it's pretty cut and dried with Carey Price. I think his will be retired, just as I think he'll be in the Hall of Fame. I think most people know that for a decade he was the Canadiens. You know, he carried this team. Unfortunately, I don't think Markov's will be, and I'm not sure. I think that's a good thing. To me, I always kept a special eye on Markov because I went to Russia in 1999 or 2000, somewhere in there, to do a piece on Russian hockey, and I keyed on three prospects, and Markov was one of them. And he had just converted from forward to defense. I think I saw him play 3 or 4 games with Dynamo Moscow, and he didn't say a word, even with a Russian translator. I could not pry even a "nyet" out of him. He was so quiet. But when he came here, I think from day one, you could see he did more for more defensive pairings than probably maybe any player in the history of the game. I mean, he made Mike Komisarek look like an all-star. And Rick would know more about this than I do, but Markov was just so smart. Again, that's my theme, is always intelligence. He was just so smart, always made the right play, so smooth that I think he never got enough attention just because he was so smooth and so smart that people didn't notice him that much. And I don't think it will be. And then there was a slight bad taste of his leaving. He should have been brought back to play his 1000th game in a Montreal uniform. I think that's absolutely cut and dried. But, you know, that one of Bergevin's great weaknesses, among many probably, is that he held grudges. And when Markov didn't sign here, Bergevin held a grudge. And organizationally, the history is always like, even if you're Larry Robinson and you get on the outs with the organization a bit, they're slow to forgive. Rick would know this better than I do, but from my observation is that even though management changes, the policy or the attitude toward that player doesn't change. I don't think Markov's number 79 is ever going up, and if it were up to me, it would.
Yeah, I think Carey Price is a very easy decision. I think he'll be the first Montreal Canadiens player who will have their number retired without winning a cup. I think that's been the prerequisite for so long, but I know after the first game this year, I had Jay Baruchel on my show, and he was talking about the Canadiens being handcuffed by their own history in a lot of their decision making and like the weight of it in trying to build a new team since, you know, like their last cup win in 1993. And I think that we're starting to shed that a little bit. You can honor the history without being stuck in place because of it. And, you know, Carey Price is probably their number retirement that moves on from the standards of the past, because frankly, it's not a 16 league anymore. You're not going to win the Stanley Cup, 5 times in 6 years. It's just not possible in the modern NHL. So we need to change the standard. But Andrei Markov is an interesting case because he has the resume, not just on and off the ice, but like just in terms of the stats. If you look at Montreal Canadiens defensemen in history, 2 of them have more points than Andrei Markov. Actually, only one. Larry Robinson. Guy Lapointe had the same amount, 572. He just did it in fewer games. So the top 5 are Larry Robinson, Guy Lapointe, Andrei Markov, Doug Harvey, and Serge Savard. Only one of those guys does not have their number retired. That's heady company, right? And we also have to look at what Andrei Markov went through in his career, blowing out both knees, the sliced tendon on the top of his foot, and still managing to come back and be a phenomenal first-pairing defenseman in his late 30s or mid to late 30s. He had an incredible career in an era where the Montreal Canadiens were not an incredible team, and it's in a lot of ways similar to Saku Koivu in that he'll probably be underappreciated because of that for his entire career in retrospect.
And I think for Carey Price, it's not a question of if, it's just a question of when his jersey will be hung up, because obviously he has the history of being one of the best to ever play for the Montreal Canadiens. And speaking of Markov, and I go back. He was a little bit of my project when I came to work with the Canadians, and he was just arriving. And I remember trying to communicate with him, and he didn't speak any English other than he knew how to grunt every time I would talk to him. So I wasn't sure if he understood what I was trying to say to him. So, that being said, there's a guy that came in an environment that was a tough one from the standpoint, language, game wise, but obviously a very, very skilled guy. And with time, as I saw him progress with both able to understand, how to play at the NHL level and, smart, great power play guy. Very seldom did he get himself in, a lot of bad situations defensively. He had his times, but when you look at his record, tied with Guy Lapointe for the most number of points for defensemen, you've got to give him full marks to be deserving of getting his jersey hung up. Those type of points are pretty special when you put them in the category of Robinson and Lapointe. And in spite of kind of the sour taste, if you will, of him kind of leaving, I think that can be put aside when it comes down to the bottom line out of all this is he made a lot of great things happen while he was part of the Montreal Canadiens. The record speaks for himself, and he would, in my books, be deserving to have his jersey hung up, and retired.
Rick, you brought up the point of you mentioning a little bit here, even with his language arts limitations in English. Did you see that, hey, this is a guy that would have a bona fide career with the Montreal Canadiens as he did during his time here in Montreal?
Well, let me tell you, Mo, it was really difficult because he was a really hard-headed guy. And again, I don't know if it was a combination of not understanding or understanding just what he wanted to understand, because there's a lot of situations that we try to convey to him, say, listen, this is the way that we like to see this being played, and let's get on board because this is consistent with what we want to have happen. And he was a challenge to the point where I remember a meeting with Andre Savard saying, listen, I don't know if this guy's going to buy into it or not. And he said, well, we'll send him to Quebec. We'll send him down, let him go ride the bus and travel a little bit and figure out that what he's doing is not acceptable. But, in hindsight, look, the guy was a good player that really found a way to understand how to advance his game. And like I said, when you see that type of point production, that doesn't happen by accident. He was a special player back there, and hats off to him for having one hell of a career.
Jack, quickly here, do you think we'll ever see another defenseman have that longevity with the Habs that Markov did with this organization?
It's hard to say because the people who are in charge now are new, and what their plan is going to be. They certainly have one in Caden Goulet, who I think is capable of being that kind of player for a long, long time. But, in this era with the cap and all the juggling you have to do to keep guys around, Tampa's been able to do it. I mean, they've had Hedman. He's well into his career now. So if they have a player of that quality, I don't see why not. I'm not sure I see anybody challenging that point total, though. I followed the guy through his whole career, and I had missed that fact. So, I think it's possible, but it's a different era, and how they're going to operate, I don't know. I don't know how any GM operates with the cap. It would have driven Stan Pollock out of his mind. So.
Andrew, final thoughts, my man.
The game's played number is gigantic too. I mean, just by virtue of that, with one team, only one defenseman has played more games for the Montreal Canadiens in their career than Andrei Markov, and that's Larry Robinson, who played an astonishing 1,202. But Markov's at 990 after him, Serge Savard at 917. So that is an incredible accomplishment that I don't think it's likely that anybody in the future is going to get to that point. It's just a different game now.
Well, I'll leave you with this gentleman here. Andrew brought up the stats of Andrei Markov. He failed to mention one former Montreal Canadian above him in the overall ranks, Eric Desjardins at 575 for his career. And Desjardins did win a cup with the Montreal Canadiens back in 1993, as we all remember, way back in the day. Well, that'll do it for this episode of the bonus question here for Hockey Inside Out. Like to subscribe our content, go on to the YouTube page, like on that, and subscribe to the montrealgazette.com/newsletters for all the latest updates from the Habs and all around the NHL. And for bonus content and full episodes, head on by Hockey Inside Out. Don't forget to submit your questions and comments. We look forward to conversing about that for a future episode. We'll speak to you soon. Bye for now.